The world is witnessing one of the deadliest escalations in modern history, and yet many are unaware of the scale of devastation. More than 1,000 people have been killed in just 2 days, and the vast majority of them are civilians. Some estimates suggest the death toll is much higher, surpassing 11,000. Even more disturbing, reports indicate that many of these deaths were executions. This is now among the highest civilian death tolls in Syria in the last 14 years. But how did we get here? What led to this shocking wave of violence? And where is Syria headed next? To fully understand this, we need to take a step back and analyze the chain of events that led to this critical moment. Syria has been through more than a decade of turmoil. The conflict traces back to 2011, when the Arab Spring protests inspired mass demonstrations against the long-standing rule of President Bashar al-Assad. The government responded with brutal crackdowns, leading to a civil war that would last over 13 years. During this period, Syria became a battleground for various groups, including rebel factions, extremist organizations like ISIS, and global powers such as Russia, the United States, Iran, and Turkey. Millions of people were displaced, entire cities were reduced to rubble, and the nation was thrown into one of the worst humanitarian crises of the 21st century. But in late last year, a turning point came. After 53 years of rule by the Assad family, the regime was overthrown. This marked the end of an era that had shaped Syria's political landscape for decades. With the fall of Assad's government, the world watched as a new leadership attempted to bring stability to the war-ravaged nation. However, as history has repeatedly shown, the removal of a dictator does not necessarily guarantee peace. What followed was a fragile transition, one that is now at risk of collapsing completely. In recent days, violence has erupted once again. Loyalists to the previous Assad regime have launched deadly attacks, targeting security forces of the new Syrian government. The fighting resumed on Thursday, and since then, the death toll has risen at an alarming rate. Civilians have been caught in the crossfire, and reports suggest that many have been executed in cold blood. The question is, why? Why are Assad loyalists still a threat, and what do they hope to achieve? To understand this, we must recognize that in a country fractured by war, not everyone agrees on what the future should look like. Some factions remain deeply loyal to the previous regime, believing that Syria was more stable under Assad's rule. Others refuse to acknowledge the new government, fearing that it lacks legitimacy and will only bring more chaos. Another crucial factor in this crisis is external influence. Syria has long been a geopolitical chessboard, with major powers backing different sides to serve their own interests. Russia, which was a key ally of Assad, may still have vested interests in seeing his loyalists regain control. Iran, too, has strong ties to pro-Assad forces. Meanwhile, the West has largely supported opposition groups, but its direct involvement has fluctuated over the years. What we are witnessing now is not just an internal struggle, but a conflict influenced by outside forces, historical grievances, and deeply entrenched power struggles. As with any war, it is the innocent civilians who suffer the most. The current violence has displaced thousands, forcing families to flee with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Hospitals are overwhelmed, struggling to treat the wounded. Access to food, water, and basic medical care is becoming increasingly difficult. International organizations have called for immediate action, urging world leaders to intervene before the situation spirals further out of control. But history tells us that diplomatic efforts often come too late, and for those on the ground, every passing day is a fight for survival. So, where does Syria go from here? There are 3 possible scenarios. The new government stabilizes the country. This would require strong leadership, international support, and a successful effort to dismantle insurgent groups. However, given Syria's history, this will not be easy. Assad loyalists could continue their attacks, pushing Syria into another cycle of violence, much like what happened in Iraq after Saddam Hussein's fall. This would lead to years of instability and suffering. If fighting escalates further and external powers become more involved, Syria could plunge into yet another devastating war, one that could have global repercussions. Right now, Syria stands at a crossroads. The choices made in the coming weeks and months will determine whether the country can finally find peace or if it will be consumed by yet another drawn-out conflict. The world must pay attention. Too often, we look away until it's too late. The people of Syria deserve a future free from war, oppression, and fear. But for that to happen, the international community must act, not just with words, but with meaningful, decisive action. As you watch this video, remember that every number in the death toll represents a human life. A father, a mother, a child. This is not just a political issue. It is a humanitarian crisis that demands awareness, urgency, and change. If you found this information valuable, share it. Spread awareness. The world cannot afford to ignore what is happening in Syria right now.